Welcome back to our second mini lecture. You already know your way around tissue processing, embedding, sectioning, and staining from your clinical rotations. I get that. But now we're going to shift gears. In this series, we examine forensic histopathology based on Detmeyer's foundational framework, as I mentioned before. But not every death requires a forensic investigation. So understanding when and why a case enters the medical legal system is the first step in our journey today. So let's get started. Not every death ends up in a forensic investigation. Understanding institutional triggers shapes the entire workflow. So let's examine who makes these jurisdictional calls. When someone passes away peacefully under the care of a physician for a known terminal illness, that is a clear clinical death. But sudden, unexplained, violent, or suspicious deaths trigger statutory mandates for a legal inquiry. And that jurisdictional boundary is where our work begins. Without these specific legal triggers, tissue never crosses our threshold. So let's look closely at how different jurisdictions handle these investigative mandates. Coroners and medical examiners operate under distinct rules. Their investigative powers directly influence how tissue reaches the lab. Let's compare their operational frameworks. A coroner is an elected or appointed official, historically relying on a separate physician to perform the actual autopsy. A medical examiner is a forensic pathologist appointed specifically for medical expertise. But regardless of the administrative title, both offices share the same core mandate: to investigate deaths outside normal clinical parameters. And the quality of that investigation directly impacts the historical context we receive with every tissue block. Now, let's explore how the forensic autopsy differs fundamentally from what happens in a hospital setting. Hospital autopsies and forensic autopsies serve completely different legal masters. So chain of custody changes everything about how tissue is handled. Let's break down those boundaries. In a clinical hospital autopsy, the goal is quality assurance, medical education, and family closure. In a forensic autopsy, every single block and slide is potential legal evidence. Chain of custody is not a bureaucratic hurdle. It is the absolute guarantee that the tissue on your microtome is the tissue taken from the decedent. If that chain breaks, the evidence becomes vulnerable in a court of law. That is why documentation must be immaculate from the moment tissue enters the lab. Now let's examine how tissue sampling itself is driven by these rigorous forensic demands. Sampling strategies in forensic cases are driven by legal mandates and investigative questions, not just routine protocols. Let's look at what gets pulled from the body and why. Unlike routine surgical pathology, where entire organs or large resections arrive for staging, forensic sampling is often targeted and purposeful. The pathologist samples specific areas to document vital reaction, timing of injury, or subtle natural disease that gross inspection misses. Every piece of tissue submitted to the histology lab represents a specific hypothesis about the cause or mechanism of death. Your technical execution turns that hypothesis into readable cellular evidence. Let's trace the journey of tissue from the body to the final report. A workflow that is far more than just a series of routine steps. This is a carefully orchestrated institutional process where each stage builds on the last, and your operational role as a histotechnologist is absolutely central. It all begins with the gross examination at the autopsy table, where the medical examiner or coroner makes initial observations and decides what to sample and how. This decision directly impacts what you receive in the lab, driven by subtle gross findings or even the absence of them, such as in sudden unexpected deaths where gross organs appear normal. Then those samples arrive at your bench for fixation, processing, embedding, sectioning, and staining. Your meticulous work transforms raw tissue into diagnostic slides. Every cut and every stain is a critical operational component. Finally, the pathologist interprets these slides, integrating your findings with all other evidence to form a comprehensive report. A breakdown at any point compromises the entire investigation, potentially leading to an incorrect conclusion or a miscarriage of justice. Understanding this flow helps you see how your technical precision directly contributes to the final conclusions. Up next, let's dive into some specific techniques that are particularly valuable in this workflow. Special stains in immunohistochemistry are not just advanced techniques. They are often indispensable tools in forensic histology, revealing details routine staining simply cannot. Think about a case involving suspected asbestos exposure, where you need to identify ferruginous bodies, or a sudden death where you must highlight early myocardial ischemia using specific enzymatic or contractility markers. I can't say that word. Special stains in immunohistochemistry become essential when looking for these subtle cellular alterations. Immunohistochemistry takes this even further, using highly specific antibodies to detect proteins and confirm vital reactions, such as identifying inflammatory cell infiltration in a wound to prove it occurred before death. These techniques turn ambiguous findings into clear, undeniable evidence, providing critical support for the medical examiner's interpretation. But remember, these advanced techniques are only as good as the tissue preparation you provide. So let's consider the broader team involved in this complex process. As we've seen, special stains in IHC provide crucial microscopic details, but forensic pathology is never a solo act. It's truly a team science. Your work in the histology lab is a vital piece of a much larger institutional puzzle, and you're collaborating with many different professionals. The forensic pathologist leads the investigation, but they rely heavily on the expertise of others. This includes medical examiners navigating complex institutional workflows versus coroner systems, forensic toxicologists detecting drugs and overdose cases, and scene investigators providing crucial context. Every member brings a unique perspective and specialized skill. Your slides provide the microscopic evidence that often ties everything together, confirming or refuting hypotheses generated by other team members. It's a constant dialogue, and your contribution is indispensable. This collaborative nature underscores why meticulous documentation is so important, which we'll discuss next. Given the team-based nature of forensic pathology, documentation and chain of custody in the histology lab are absolutely non-negotiable. This isn't just about good lab practice, it's about maintaining the legal integrity of evidence that will face courtroom scrutiny. Every single step from receiving the tissue to producing the final slide must be meticulously recorded. This includes dates, times, who handled the sample, and what procedures were performed. For example, when a tissue cassette arrives from a suspicious death investigation, you log its unique identifier, the date and time of receipt, and who received it. The chain of custody ensures an unbroken record of possession, proving the evidence hasn't been tampered with or swapped. Imagine a prosecutor presenting your slide in court. They need to show exactly how that slide was created and handled. Any break in this chain can compromise the evidence and potentially derail an entire case. Your detailed records protect the integrity of the investigation and uphold justice. With that in mind, let's summarize our key takeaways from this lecture. So let's close with a quick summary of what we covered today, reinforcing the critical operational role you play. First, forensic histopathology asks a fundamentally different question than clinical histopathology. So we're shifting the focus from treatment to reconstruction and investigation. Remember, not all deaths are forensic cases. So forensic cases usually involve suspicious deaths, sudden deaths, unattended deaths, things like that. A forensic autopsy is legally authorized, meaning you do not need to have family consent. Hospital autopsies, you do have to have family consent, but medical forensic autopsies, you do not. Again, the histology lab sits at the center of that investigative science team that we've talked about, right? And then, of course, chain of custody is a core competency. So thank you for your attention, and I'll see you in the next mini lecture. Thanks.